So, Mr. Trowbridge, let's get the statistical stuff off the board and let's talk about the matchups that matter. And what this segment is we're going to look at a few matchups that we think are key to Notre Dame either winning or holding their own. Some of them are about winning. You need to win that matchup. In others, it's you just need to not get dominated in that matchup. And it's not that you can't win it. It's just that winning isn't necessarily required for you to win this football game. And we'll dive into three. I've got three, Trev, and I know some of these we're going to be on the same page on. I'm curious to hear what other ones you have. But this is where a lot of this game is going to be decided. Scheme is important and big picture things like execution, and we'll dive into the keys to victory and all that kind of stuff. But it also, at the end of the day, all those things are about what? Players making plays. Who wins the player matchup? And Notre Dame's defense has been challenged a lot here in this postseason by good units and talented players. They're going to get challenged once again by an offense that's probably at the skill positions the most talented that they've faced this year. I believe that to be true. Just looking at all the different skill positions. Like Penn State's better than them at tight end. I think Penn State's slightly better than them at running back. But the gap between receivers is enormous, right? But you could make a case that Penn State, quarterback talent is similar. I think Drew Aller's more talented than Will Howard. I think Will Howard has a lot more experience and a little bit more polished than Drew Aller. But and that matters more to me than NFL draft potential, right? They faced, Louisville had a talented group. It's not like, with all due respect to Ja'Cory Brooks and Colin Lacey and Chris Bell, they're not as good as Ohio State's pass catchers, and they're not as good as running back as Ohio State is. So I think this is the most talented group they faced all year. I would argue that this is also the best defense that Ohio State will have faced all year. But Ohio State's offense has also been challenged this year by playing some pretty good defenses. So Penn State's, as Notre Dame fans found out, Penn State's got a really good defense. Indiana's got a really good defense. Michigan has a really good defense. Michigan didn't struggle this year because of their defense, Trev. They struggled this year because of their offense. And Ohio State didn't always perform well in those games, but then they faced a very highly regarded defense in Tennessee and lit them up, right? And then Texas, obviously, is very highly regarded defense, very talented defense, and they held them in check to a degree, but Ohio State did enough to win. What's it going to look like in this game? I don't know. Let's talk about the matchups. And I think the first one is the most obvious, and that's the matchup in the trenches. I know I have that number 2 on this one, but that was meant to be number 1. It's the matchup in the trenches, and there's 2 aspects to this. It's you've got to perform well on the edge like you did against Georgia. You just have to, and I think the Ohio State tackles remind me of the Georgia tackles. They're big, they're long. I think that their left tackle is more athletic than Georgia's left tackle, but he's a natural guard. You got to try to take advantage of that. I think Donovan Jackson did a pretty darn good job in the second half against Abdul Carter when he was forced to play left tackle against Penn State. And so but here's the thing, you got to win on the edge, Trev. I mean, this is such an important part of this game. You've got to be able to win on the edge and get some pressure on the quarterback. And then the second part of this matchup is the one up the middle. This is where I think Ohio State is in a bit more trouble in a matchup against Notre Dame because they're down their All-American center. He's out. Their right guard's a big kid, solid player, but not a great player. And their left guard situation is also been impacted by injuries this season. So, Donovan Jackson is normally your left tackle or left guard. He was an All-American this year. He was a first-team All-Big Ten guy as primarily left guard, but at times you had to move him out to left tackle, and he played tackle in the playoff game against Texas, and he played tackle against Penn State. So he's done it at times. It's not like he's never done it, but he's not playing his best position. Well, against Texas, he handled himself. He gave him 1 pressure the whole game. Their right tackle, however, gave up 4 pressures according to Pro Football Focus. Their right guard gave up 2. Their left guard gave up 2. Their center gave up 2. Their other guard, Austin Sareveld, who comes in the game, gave up a pressure. All 3 of the sacks that Pro Football Focus has Texas is getting in that game were against their guards. So, there's 2 different aspects of this, just like we talked about in the Georgia game. This is kind of a repeat of the Georgia matchup, Trev, because you've got to win on the edge And you talked a lot about that going to the game. Like, if you can win on the edge against Georgia, you've got a chance. And those were good Georgia tackles who, as I said, I think the first sack that Monroe Freeland gave up all season was against Notre Dame, and they got him 3 times. Hopefully he can have a similar success against Donovan Jackson, who doesn't give up a lot of pressures. And there's a reason. Like, some guys are All-Americans because of reputation. Let's be honest about that. That's not true for Donovan Jackson. But like, look, Penn State got him twice. Even though he held his own, he still gave up 2 sacks. Problem is Notre Dame doesn't have Abdul Carter. You know what I mean? But that worked against Georgia. So I think that edge battle is huge in the pass game, and it's going to be big in the run too, Trev. You got to set the edge better against this team than you did against Penn State. But up the middle is where Notre Dame could have an advantage. Like edge, it's hold your own, make some plays. Up the middle, it's like you should be better. You've got to play that way. And last year, a big success Notre Dame had is Riley Mills and Howard Cross played really well against Ohio State last year up the middle. You don't have Riley Mills and Howard Cross isn't 100%. Can Gabriel Rubio step up like he did, I thought, at times against Penn State? Can Donovan Heinisch have a big game? Can Howard Cross – this is the last game that young man's ever going to play in Notre Dame uniform. Is he going to just kind of like, hey, he's going to let it all hang out. That's not a question. But is he healthy enough for that to result in him playing like the All-American he was last season? As we'll find out. So this matchup is going to be super intriguing, Trev, and it's really ultimately where I think the game is going to be won and lost and we're going to have a similar talk tomorrow about the other side, right? And it's going to be huge.
At the end of the day, for Notre Dame, all roads lead back to the trenches, and there's going to be no better opportunity for Marcus Freeman to kind of showcase what his program philosophy is of wanting to be built around the offensive and defensive lines and in the national championship, right? Like you literally can't play in a bigger game like this in college football. Literally can't. And no, I agree with you. I'm going to be paying very, very close attention to that battle in the middle because it's going to be something where, and you hit on all the points, so I won't beat a dead horse, but those 3 guys specifically have to have games. And I'm not talking about like, oh, they had moments. They have to have games, right? Like these are the matchups where we've talked about it ad nauseum. Yes, we've talked about it ad nauseum this year, man. When Notre Dame's defense is at its best, it is stiff up the middle in the run game, and it is generating pressure up the middle in the pass game. Like that's when their defense is at their best. No questions asked. Now, the edge rushers against Georgia, to your point, Brian, were a pleasant surprise. Like we had talked about it in the pregame of like if this happens, Georgia's going to have a long day on offense, which they did. They scored 10 points, right? I don't know if there's a tough day scenario in that Ohio State's offense is held to 10 points. Like it's just for Notre Dame, winning up the middle is going to be huge. So I'm right there alongside with you, man. Paying attention to that battle in the trenches, especially up the middle, is going to be absolutely huge.
Another one, obviously, it's going to be Jeremiah Smith against your secondary. And I say that focus primarily on the outside corners. But Ohio State, as we said earlier, they're going to find ways to get him matched up against Jordan Clark. They're going to find ways to get him matched up against the safeties. What's Notre Dame's answer in those situations? What's Al Golden's call? Is it any different if he sees Jeremiah Smith in the slot compared to playing outside? Do they switch? Do they, if he's in the slot and somebody else is outside, do they put Jordan Clark outside, who has played some outside corner, and then have Leonard Moore or Christian Gray play inside? That's going to be an interesting way to look at it. I'm curious to see how it's going to go. But I think he's going to get his yards in this game, Trev, but it's like we talk about a lot. Yeah, he's going to get his yards, but you need to make him earn those yards, and you need to make him not as efficient when they're throwing the ball to him. That's always such a big part of these matchups, Trev, is look, Tyler Warren's going to get his, but what they needed to do a better job of in that game, in my opinion, was you had to make them less efficient when they threw him the football. We talked about that being the key in that game, and they didn't do a very good job of that. He was targeted 7 times, and he completed 6 of them. Now, there was a couple times I would say that they did a pretty good job of locking him down, which forced Drew Aller to scramble, including on a key 3rd down where they stopped him short of the sticks. Yeah. It also locked him down on that. He was looking at Tyler Warren on that interception at the end of the game. He had to go away from him because they locked him down, and that doesn't necessarily reflect the statistics, but that's part of it. But if you can say, hey, look, Jeremiah Smith catches 6 balls for 90 yards and he did it on 8 targets, that's a rough day for you. If he catches 6 balls for 80 yards and he has to do it on 13 targets or 12 targets, that's a much better performance, because that means, 6, 7 times you forced zeros, and those are going to be big parts of this game, is create more inefficient. Now, if you can shut him down the way that you did Marvin Harrison the last 2 years, great. But I'm not expecting Christian Gray and Benjamin and Leonard Moore to be Benjamin Morrison. If they are, great.
Yeah.
But I'm not demanding that the way that you kind of felt Benjamin could last year. And also they use him a little bit different than they used Marvin Harrison Jr. last year. They will get him matched up against other guys. They'll move him around more than they did with Marvin last year. And I think that's a big part of it. You got to keep him from taking this game over, especially early. Yeah. They're going to go to him because he got shut out last game. I promise you, I'll be shocked if I'm wrong on this. First 2 drives of the game, we're going to see at least 3 or 4 throws that are just geared towards we're getting for the football. Mm-hmm. And some of them will be like little screens. Some of them are going to be, we're going to do something to isolate him, and we're going to take him, like against cover 1, they're going to throw a slot fade to him early in the game. I'll be shocked if they don't do that against Jordan Clark or a safety. Shocked if they don't do that. I could see them trying to get into 12 personnel to try to bait Notre Dame into going into their base personnel and then doing something to try to, motion him across and get the Notre Dame's corner chasing, and then he runs a wheel route off of that, something like that. I absolutely think that we're going to see them early in the game force the ball to him. If you can make them not effective in that, then that's your chance of getting off the field early against Ohio State. I don't know if you agree with that, Trevor, but I'll be shocked if they don't try to force the ball. Not force the ball like Will Howard's going to throw into triple coverage. What I mean is game plan is geared towards we've got to get for the football early and get him into a rhythm, because their offense is better when 4's rolling.
Yeah, I mean, they even tried to do a little bit of that against Texas. Like, they were trying to get him some jet sweeps. They were trying to get him out on some screen plays, and it wasn't working. And so I think you're going to see a little bit of a mix of both. It would not surprise me early if on the first or second offensive series there's a shot deep downfield before. That would not surprise me in the slightest, especially like when you go back and you look at I think if Jeremiah Smith is matched up on Christian Gray, they're taking a shot. I don't think that they would do that against Leonard Moore, because to me now, like, the true freshman thing is gone. Like, it's not they might pick on Leonard Moore because he's a true freshman. Like, he is now no longer a true freshman. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yes, he is, but his performance on the field has kind of proven otherwise. Christian Gray, on the other hand, has been a little bit susceptible to those big plays really ever since like the Virginia game, when he started giving stuff up to Malachi Fields, and then it kind of turned into the USC game. He was caught flat-footed against Arian Smith, and I think that the corners played an outstanding game against Penn State. So, good bounce-back game there. But if I'm weighing my odds of who I'm taking a shot against, if I'm Ohio State, I think it's going to be 29, not 15. But I think it's going to be a little bit of both. I think that they're going to try to get him screen passes early. I think that they're going to try to get him on some jet sweeps, like just anything to get him more involved in the game plan. Because what defenses have done throughout the season is then they really hone in on 4. They start contributing a lot of resources on 4. And that's when Emeka Egbuka can start killing you. That's when that happens. So containing Jeremiah Smith early is imperative. And again, it goes to tackling in the open field, keeping everything in front of you, no blowing assignments, no blown coverages. And so that, along with just overall secondary, the matchups that have to matter, is your guys have to just go make more key plays than Ohio State's guys. Like, that's, I said it at the start of the show. When you have the opportunity to pick off a pass, got to complete that play. Not really so much worried about Xavier Watts doing that, because he's done it again all season long when he's had the opportunity to make a play on the ball. But Christian Gray, when you have that, like, he's done it when the lights are the brightest, like they said it in the Here Come the Irish show, is like they call them franchise for a reason. And when the lights are the brightest, but sometimes when the lights aren't the brightest and it's just the middle of the second quarter, you don't have to wait till the end of the game to get a game-changing pick six. You don't have to wait till the end of the game to pick off Drew Aller to put you in field goal range with 33 seconds left on the clock. You please feel free to do it in the second quarter if given the opportunity. So win the big moments and contain 4, huge for the secondary.
I got a little stat for you, Trev. We're
Yeah.
both stats nerds, so I love it. This year, Ohio State has, see, 1, 2, see that game, so that's 7, 12, 13. And let's see here, 4 times Ohio State this year has been held to in the 20s or lower in points. And in each of those games, they scored 21 or fewer offensive points. So I'm including the Texas game. And in those games, when you look at the production from Jeremiah Smith, he's had 13 catches for 163 yards in those 4 games. That's Nebraska, it's Penn State, it's Michigan, and it's Texas. I'm not even including the Indiana game because they scored over 20. But in that game against Indiana, if you want to talk about, well, okay, where they were held to 20 points in a traditional manner, they didn't have a 7-yard touchdown drive off of the turnover. You could throw that game in there too, 3 catches for 34 yards. Like, it's not a coincidence. In games where he has had 80 or more yards receiving, they have scored 52, 56, 38, 35, 31, 45, 31, 42, and 41 points. It's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not a coincidence that Ohio State has struggled to score against Notre Dame the last 2 years, and Marvin Harrison didn't have 100 yards combined in those 2 games. It's not a coincidence. If you keep him in check, you got a shot. If you can't, they're going to score. I mean, it's accomplishing both of those is not easy for either team, but it is that simple for me to sit here and say that.
Right.
There's another matchup that I like in this game, Trev, that I think is going to be very interesting, and it's the matchup of the Notre Dame linebackers against the Ohio State running backs. This is a huge game in every aspect of the game, Trev. You got to make tackles on Travion. They had a bad fit last year and a hold that wasn't called, which it's SEC refs. It won't get called again this game. If you hold Cam Hart or Benjamin Morrison or Leonard, or excuse me, if you hold Christian Gray or Leonard Moore the same way that they held Cam Hart in that long touchdown run, it's not going to get called. You have to fit better at the linebacker level in the run game. Can't afford to overrun plays. Can't afford to be a gap too narrow when you're playing backside. You have to have great gap integrity at linebacker. You're going to get opportunities in the hole to hit their running backs. Got to stand them up. Can't let them hit you and then fall forward for 3-4 more yards. And in the pass game, you've got to be disciplined and keep them in check. When they get the ball in space, you got to bring them down in space. This matchup between the Notre Dame running backs or the Notre Dame linebackers and the Ohio State running backs, and I'm including Quinshon Judkins in this in the run game, but especially Travion Henderson is huge in this game. And it's from a run fit standpoint. It's a tackling standpoint and not letting them get yards after contact in the run game. And it's absolutely about the pass game. If you can keep Travion Henderson from ripping off big plays, you've got a really good shot at slowing this offense down with the way your secondary's played. If you don't allow Quinshon Judkins to gash you with big runs, you've got a shot to keep Ohio State in check. When did Ohio State start to take control of the game 2 years ago? It's when they started, Mayan Williams started just gashing them on the run game, right? What broke the game open last year and forced Notre Dame to be in comeback mode? 60-yard touchdown run by Travion Henderson. Those have been the keys. They haven't beat you throwing the ball the last 2 years. They beat you running the ball. Not for volume in both games. It was volume 2 years ago. It wasn't volume last year. That's going to be key. And I think the Notre Dame linebackers are going to be a big role. And when you get your opportunities for negatives, you've got to create negatives when those chances are there. If you got a chance to tackle a guy for -2, it's got to go for -2. You can't let him make you miss and get 2 yards. Now you say, hey, look, that's a good play for the defense. It's only got a 2-yard gain. I get that, but I'd rather have the -2. The -2 is better. You think about that in the Penn State game. If Jaden Ausberry takes a little bit better angle on that play where Tyler Warren drops back to pass and he's ground.
Yeah.
I think they scored on that drive.
I think, yeah. Singleton punched it in.
you get a chance to tackle him 3-4 yards behind the line of scrimmage. You got to do it. Now, what's the benefit that Jaden Osbury will have in this game compared to that one is neither of those guys are 6'6" with really long arms that can kind of stiff arm you and keep you off of their body. You know what I mean? That's a different kind of matchup. You know what I mean? But it's still a key point. And up until that game, Jaden had been great in space. And so it's not a coincidence that he wasn't in a game against a 6'6", 260-pound tight end. But like he also got beat on a wheel route, and Will Howard's not going to miss that the way that Drew Aller did, in my opinion.
Right.
So this matchup between the running backs and linebackers is going to be huge, absolutely huge in this game, Trev.
Oh, it's monumental. Look, everybody's going to talk about the Ohio State pass catchers and Will Howard, and like rightfully so. But the way that I look at this is when you're going up against the Jeremiah Smiths and the Emeka Egbukas and the Carnell Tates in this high-powered passing offense, what you can't do is let the running game hurt you. Linebackers are going to play a huge role in that. I like when you play against big-name players like that, they're going to get theirs, right? Like winning these matchups looks different than when Notre Dame played Virginia, right? Like winning these matchups is not letting them completely take over games, not letting Jeremiah Smith do what he did to Tennessee and Oregon, right? I mean, not letting, winning a matchup for in games like this is Indiana not allowing Jeremiah Love to go 98 on half of a knee and with the flu like that.
And Jadarin to bust a 20-yarder to set up their next touchdown, right?
Right. So you have to keep it in check, but really good players are going to get theirs. And I've been a huge proponent of that. I've been talking about the first time that I said that was Ohio State's matchup with Notre Dame in the 2015 Fiesta Bowl. Like that's kind of when I started watching football a little differently. And that's when they had Zeke Elliott and all those guys. And I said it again in 2022 when Notre Dame was playing USC. It was, look, Caleb Williams is probably going to win the Heisman Trophy. He's going to get his. He's going to do some crazy dancing around, running in the backfield, amazing play. That is what it is. You can't let USC establish the run. You can't let them run the ball effectively on you. And they had over 200 yards rushing in that game. And so it's just, to me, this matchup is huge. The linebackers are going to have to tackle better than what they did. They're going to have to fit better than what they did. And when 32's in the game, you have to be aware of him just kind of slipping out of the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
You do. And when Quinshon's in the game, man, you get, like, he is a hard runner. Like, I know I kind of take slight jabs at him, and like that's not me saying that he's a bad running back.
He can be a hard runner. Yeah. There's times I've seen him make some business decisions.
I have
that against Oregon. You know what I mean? But I don't think he's doing that in the national title game.
No, I don't think so either. And for the most part in the playoffs, he's been
physical. He was very physical against Texas.
He was. And so, the way that I look at that is Notre Dame's linebacking core this year has been great in tackling. And not only have they been like fundamentally sound, they bring the wood when they want to. And when two's in the game, it's got to be a little bit more of the same thing, man, because he's going to bring it. And I never played defense, but the thing that I was always told is you'd rather dish out punishment than receive it. And so that's got to be top of mind. So fundamentally sound tackling, know where 32 is whenever he's on the football field, and tackle well, man. Tackle.
I played defense my senior year of high school, and that's a fact. Hitting someone doesn't hurt as much as getting hit.
Yeah.
It's a fact. So I can support that. Look, I thought the linebackers played great against Georgia. I thought they played really well against Indiana. They got to play like that. That's the key.
Yeah.
They didn't play great against Penn State.
No.
And that factored into, I mean, it's part of that's Penn State played well. I mean, you tip your cap to the opponent sometimes. I mean, but there was also opportunities where the linebackers had bad fits. They took bad angles. They didn't properly recognize wheel routes coming out of the backfield, and that that hurt them. And Penn State's running backs played really well, but when they needed to step up in the third quarter and get stops, they did. And you're going to need that early against Penn State. And we'll get into the keys to victory about different aspects of what you need to do early and that kind of stuff in our show later in the week. But I think and look. There's other matchups we could talk about that are sort of side matchups. I think the Jordan Clark versus Emeka Egbuka matchup could be huge in this game. If Jordan Clark can again keep somewhat keep Emeka in check. You're going to see at other times where the safeties are going to have to be on him. I think that's a really big matchup in this game. We could kind of do this all day long. You could throw Cardinal Tate into this conversation where you guys can't let him kind of get into his thing and go off. That's another big matchup. We could break down each, like we said with the offensive line, we kind of did it as a whole, but we could have spent 15 minutes talking about the edge battle. We could have spent 15 minutes talking about the interior battle. But some of these battles, Trevor, about hold your own. Linebackers versus running backs, just hold your own. You don't need to dominate them, because if you hold your own, you're shutting down the run game, right? You don't have to. If you dominate them, that's great. Offensive line on the edge, got to hold your own against their tackles. Got to hold your own and win some. Inside, you got to dominate. Against Jeremiah Smith, got to hold your own. Against Emeka Egbuka, got to hold your own. Against Cardinal Tate, I'm sorry, you got to dominate that one. I mean, if you're the cornerback room we think you are, that you got to dominate that one. So those are all aspects of it where you look at it and say, hey, this is going to be a big one. But I think one of the most intriguing matchups, Trev, and we'll just end with this, and this is something you're going to write an article about here this week, is I cannot wait to see the matchup of Al Golden, Mike Mickens, Al Washington, and Max Bulla against Chip Long, Ryan Day, Brian Hartline, Justin Fry, and the rest of that Ohio State offensive coaching staff. Like, that's going to play a big role in this too. And it's about preparation. It's about getting your players in positions to be successful and then properly motivating them to play their best football. And I don't mean motivating by like a speech. I mean just building up their confidence throughout the week, and to get them where they're just when the game comes on, they're like, whew, they're wild animals. You're just holding back and just let them go and go see what they do. I'm looking forward to seeing that, man. But yeah, that coaching battle is going to be fun, Trev.
Oh, that chess match is going to be fantastic. I mean, and we got a little preview of it when Andy Kotelnicki went up against Al Golden in the Orange Bowl. Like round one went to Kotelnicki. Round two, second half goes to Al Golden for the adjustments that he made. I mean, I don't think people realize that in one quarter, they went from allowing 141 rushing yards and a half to -3 in the third. I mean, that's coaching adjustments. Like, that's getting your guys to calm down, putting people in better positions to win. And then the players also have to go out and win, right? But no, it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be, again, I can already see it. No matter what the outcome of the game is, we're going to be sitting in the post-game show talking about it was punch after counter punch after response after response after adjustment. It's going to be so much fun to watch, man. It's going to be so much fun to watch.
Can't wait. And it's going to be about who has the better early plan and then who makes the best adjustments. And when you're really dominating your opponent as a coach, is like, I found, like, when I was coaching, when I was counter punching, I was playing catch up. When I was ahead of him and ahead of my opponent and we're always kind of one step ahead of their adjustments, that's when we were rolling. Like that's who's going to be that? Or is it just going to be like punch, counter punch, punch, counter punch? Like it could go one of three ways. And hopefully if you're Notre Dame, you're constantly having Ohio State playing catch up. They think they have your pressure package down and then you bring something different, and we think we have their coverage structure down and then they do something different. It's being ahead of that opponent is going to be key. That's going to be absolutely huge. So I'm looking forward to that. But I think the adjustments piece is gonna be a big part of that. Big part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I cannot wait to watch it all go down. And after getting myself this juiced up and this excited about it, kind of stinks that we have to wait 6 more days.
Yes.
Kind of stinks. But outside of that, it's not too bad, man. I'm
Yep.
I'm pumped that we can continue diving into it.
Yeah. Trev.